here in this place, focused on the city's strategic priorities and the role of local government. So we're going to start with a land acknowledgement that is always done now in this place and probably at your colleges and universities. As this meeting is both in person and virtual, and we are not all gathered in the same place, I recognize that this land acknowledgement may not be for the territory that you are currently on. We ask that if this is the case, you acknowledge the traditional territory you are on and the current treaty holders. For those of us in Toronto, I'd like to acknowledge that the land we are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 of the Mississauga of the Credit. And just pause for a sec to let that sink in a little bit, what that might mean for us in the work and the studies that we are undertaking. So, I'm Joe Mihevc, professor at York University. I used to be a city councillor for 28 years, sitting right there where Mark is. Stand up for a sec, Mark. That was my seat. I started in local politics in the early 1990s with a strong social justice impetus. I wanted to change the world. Think globally and act locally was deep in my mind. My parents were refugees from war-torn Europe. They felt the pain of the world, and their children did as well. Who would have thought that their son would have been in local politics? And so for 28 years, I did what I did here at City Council. It was an amazing ride. And I have come really to love this place and the possibilities that it has for our city and our country. I give this background because I think that maybe right here in this room, there is some budding municipal politician. Someone, maybe you, Mark, maybe someone else, someone who sees something that needs changing or something that needs to be improved and has a social passion to run for elected office. I say go for it. Learn everything you can in this course about how the system works. Then root yourself in a local neighborhood, an agency, or a community of interest to experience both the pain and joy of community life and city life, and develop some good leadership skills. And then, at the right time, look in the mirror and ask the question, should I contribute to a better city and a better world by running for city council? That's a good question. So now I have the privilege of trying to help students understand how the city works and how it can contribute to a better life for its residents. It is wonderful to see students, you folks here, interested in City Hall and this course. At this course, you will have a chance to hear from the most senior City Hall officials over the next several weeks, each one of them doing amazing work. Maybe there's a civil servant in you. They'll talk about their journey as well in their presentation. That is also a journey that you may wish to explore through this course. To provide a description of today's event, Civic Lab TO is presented by the Strategic Partnership and City Manager's Office within the City of Toronto in collaboration with eight colleges and universities in the City of Toronto. That's how many there are. So not only are you getting the best from City Hall, you're also meeting professors and students, urban geeks, like we all are, from across the city. We hope that new relationships across academic institutions get formed in this class as well. And you are part of a bigger agenda. Civic leaders from the city and higher education institutions are forging a new path of collaboration. We don't want the universities over there with their smart folks and City Hall over here asking some deep questions about how to build a better city. We want them working together And so this project, this course, is part of a bigger project to get the two sets of institutions collaborating more so that we tap the brains and the global experience of the university and college network, and the cities then benefit or advise universities and college professors on real life issues that the cities are facing. So we are thrilled as well to be hosting Civic Lab TO curriculum in this city council chambers. This is a very unique learning space to be in, and we are thrilled to be able to share this with all of you students here. This here is the scene of the crime, so to speak. From here on in, when you see in the media a picture or a report with council chambers in the backdrop, you'll be able to say, hey, I was there. Hey, I know the angle from which that camera was positioned. This is council chambers where this crazy thing we call local democracy plays out, and where some pretty big decisions are made on how this city is going to move forward. A tremendous amount of planning has gone on between academic institutions and the City of Toronto to deliver this curriculum. The City of Toronto secured an amazing lineup of senior staff and policy experts for each of the sessions. Thank you to all of our partners that I'll name in a sec who have made this possible. On our behalf, as the colleges and universities, I want to thank in particular and introduce Jeff Moore, and I'd ask him to stand up. He's right there. He's the dude that has made it happen on the city end, and let's give him an applause. And then there are, thank you, Jeff, and then there are the participating professors that I want to introduce. And I'll invite you to stand up after I introduce you all. Centennial College, Shane Walker; George Brown College, Leslie Wee; Humber Polytechnique, Marcin Kedzior; OCAD University, Sarah Diamond; Seneca Polytechnique, Gus Lynn Peluso; Toronto Metropolitan University, Leah Cook; University of Toronto, Aditi Mehta; and York University, yours truly. Let's see who they are so that you get to meet them as well. They've put this course together. There they are. Okay, before I pass the baton on to the guest speakers for today's session, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded, and participants are asked on the student side not to share any personal information within the meeting. Lawyers. This session will be available on www.civiclabsto.ca/curriculum, and will be made available to your instructor, who will then pass it on to you if you want to review and see how silly we were on the camera. If you have joined us in person or in council chambers, welcome. And please note that we ask you to avoid using the virtual WebEx webinar connection that really is for people who are in the not here today. So don't turn it off if you've got it on now. The washrooms are located at the end of these hallways. You go to the end, and you'll sooner or later find a washroom if you need one. There will be a time for questions and answers at the end of today's events. If you are joining the session virtually and would like to submit a question during the session, please enter it into the Q&A function, which is the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and we will find a way. We have a very fancy technique of getting it from you to us up here to the people answering the questions. If you are joining us in person and are sitting in this circle here, where the counselors usually sit and some staff, you'll be invited to just basically press the mic in front of you, pretend you're a city councilor, and ask the big question. Once your question is asked, please press the speaking mic button again, and that will mute the mic. We also have a wireless microphone, and someone is going to be walking around with that wireless if you have any questions in the seated area, from the seated area up above. Okay, again, we ask you to avoid disclosing any personal notes when you're asking your question. Everyone joining us virtually will be manually muted during the event, but not at the Q&A session. Lastly, after this class today, so from about 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock, there will be a reception for the university students. Now, we're not meaning to discount the college students, but the university students have a different kind of assignment, a written assignment that they will be doing, and one of them is to basically connect with someone from another university and do a paper together. And this will be your opportunity, so if you can hang in for another hour, we have coffee and tea that we brought upstairs. Actually, you're all invited. College students, you're invited up as well. If you want to connect, network with some people from other institutions, come on up, have a coffee, and we're going to do a little exercise up there to make sure that you're ready to do that reflection paper together with a student from another college university. Okay, so on to today's presentations. Today we're going to hear from three people. David Jollymore, who's the Deputy City Manager for Corporate Services. That's the second in command. He has a whole big area of work. We have John Elvidge, who is the City Clerk, and Jennifer Forks, who is the Acting Deputy City Clerk, Secretariat from the City Clerk's office. They make sure everything just runs smoothly and everyone's following good process and that the decisions are good and wholly made. Okay, so over to David Jollymore to start the presentation. Let's give him a little round of applause.
Thanks, Joe, for the kind introduction, and I want to welcome everyone to City Hall. I'm so happy to be here in person in the council chamber, and I know we have a large number of attendees for today online. We are very excited for this opportunity to invite you into City Hall through the Civic Lab TO program and give you a sense for the interworking of the city government. Today, I will be telling you a bit about the role of the city's public service to support council's objectives and direction and the city's strategic priorities. The overview I will give you today should help to set stage and provide a foundation for future sessions that are planned in the coming weeks through the Civic Lab TO program. I am so grateful for this opportunity to talk to you and to give you my insights in the workings of City Hall. And the reason is I'm passionate about the work we do here at City Hall as the public service, and that is really focused on improving the lives of all Torontonians. I came to the city about 10 years ago from the private sector, and it was a bit of a shock, to be honest. And I, like all of my colleagues who work in the public service, we work here to make a difference in people's lives. And when I first joined the city, and I think this might be the engineer in me, I wanted to use my experience in process improvement and transformational change to make government more effective. That was 10 years ago. My eyes have been opened. Now it's about making life better for the people of Toronto. So I hope today that today's session and speakers inspire you to consider working for municipal government, either as a political player or as a member of city staff. Hopefully through the presentations today, we get some excitement around what we do here at City Hall. So I'll go on to the first slide. So Toronto is an always growing, diverse city, and municipal government is the level of government that touches people most in their day-to-day lives. Garbage collection, clean and safe drinking water, snow clearing, parks, health, housing, childcare services, fire, police, paramedics, 311, and I could go on for another 10 minutes listing out all of the services that the city provides. The city believes in our motto, diversity, our strength. And we have a workforce that reflects the vibrant communities of Toronto. Having this diverse workforce ensures city policies, programs, and service delivery is considered through a variety of lenses. And that helps us to meet the needs of all residents, visitors, and businesses in the city. The role of the public service is to provide our best advice to City Council and support the decision-making process of City Council. So that's our basic and fundamental role as the public service. And it's also important to say that in giving that best advice, we must always remain politically neutral. Next slide. So I'm going to go through the organization with you, and this is a slide that shows the administrative organizational structure of the city. Starting at the top, the city manager is the senior-most official in the city's administrative structure, reports to City Council, and is the head of the Toronto Public Service. We also have the city clerk and the city solicitor reporting to City Council, and the city clerk will go into more detail about his role later. And I was glad that I was invited to the center table where the city clerk makes it all happen. We also have accountability officers reporting directly to council that ensure that local municipal government remains open and transparent. As you can see from the corporate organizational chart, the city has a large and complex team organized into service areas to help manage our work. We have 3 service areas that provide services and programs directly to the public. Community and Social Services provides diverse range of social and community services which allow all Torontonians to participate in the social and economic life of the city. Community and Social Services includes divisions like Employment and Social Services, Children's Services, Parks, Forestry and Recreation, and Toronto Shelter and Support Services, among many other. Infrastructure Services works to enhance Toronto's vitality and quality of life for residents and provides the hard services to the public. Solid waste management services, Toronto Water, and transportation services, to name a few. Next, we have Development and Growth Services, and this is a relatively new service area consisting of all of those divisions that support development and the growth of the city with a particular focus on housing. Divisions in Development and Growth Services include City Planning, Development Review, Toronto Building, and the Housing Secretariat. We also have service areas that support the corporation and enable public services and the municipal government's ability to operate. We have corporate services which supports and enables the divisions to provide their services to the public. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. Finally, we have Finance and Treasury Services, which supports the corporation on financial planning, budgeting, accounting, and procurement, among other things. The next Civic Lab TO session will talk about the city finances in greater detail, and Steve Conforti, the city CFO and treasurer, will be here to speak to you. You will also notice other key functions on the org chart, like People and Equity, Communications, the Indigenous Affairs Office, and others that report directly to the city manager, providing specific focus and support. The Toronto Public Service is responsible for solving cross-cutting, complicated issues which demands cross-functional collaboration and teamwork. No single division can work on their own to address the issues that we face as a city. Most large projects and files rarely sit fully in any one division, despite the linear layout that you see on the chart. Next slide, please. The city also has chosen to deliver services through 134 agencies and corporations for a variety of reasons. Those reasons include adding focus, expertise, and experience, meeting legislative or objectivity requirements, leveraging city resources by attracting funding, meeting objectives beyond core municipal services, operating in a commercial market environment, or engaging local communities and diverse perspectives to guide the city's service delivery. And through a whole-of-government approach, the city manager's office works to advance relationships with the city's agencies and corporations to ensure alignment, and that these organizations deliver services and operate in compliance within their council-approved mandates. Next slide, please. As I spoke about, the city manager is the senior-most official in the city's administrative structure and is accountable to city council for essentially two main things. Number one, ensuring that the staff who deliver the city's essential programs and services work together to deliver high quality and cost-effective services to Torontonians. And number two, achieving the priorities set out by City Council and the Mayor. There are 4 deputy city managers, or DCMs, myself included, and a chief financial officer and treasurer that report to the city manager. Each DCM oversees what we call a service area, which is a collection of generally related city divisions. I'll speak a bit more about my service area in the coming slides. Next slide, please. I want to talk a bit about the workplace culture we are striving for at the city. The greatest asset we have is our people. People make it happen. And it needs to be a priority of all of ours to develop and foster an environment that brings out our best ideas, our best work, our best selves. A great workplace culture happens when everybody is respected, valued and empowered, diverse and inclusive, making a difference and working together. And the great thing about our workplace culture framework is that every member of the Toronto Public Service had the opportunity to provide input into this framework, and thousands of our team members took that opportunity. I think it goes without saying, but it's important for me to specifically mention our workplace culture because it's really the core of our leadership approach and directly impacts our performance as a public service. Next slide. These are the pillars of our corporate strategic plan. The corporate strategic plan establishes a common understanding of the work we need to focus on to be successful, delivering our day-to-day services with excellence, and ensuring a high quality of life for all Torontonians. And I'll briefly talk about each of the pillars. People and culture. What the Toronto Public Service does each day matters. We make a difference in the lives of Torontonians on a daily basis. As I mentioned, our staff are critical to our success, and we must prioritize them. Partnerships. We will be intentional and actively seek partnerships that support programs and services which improve the quality of life in the city. Like this one with you, partnerships help breed innovation and strengthens our culture of collaboration. The city cannot solve our issues alone. Performance. This is about ensuring continuous improvement of everyone who works here and in everything we do. It's about getting a little bit better each day in service to Torontonians. And finally, our priorities. These priorities have been set out and designed to be clear, focused, and built for the long term to ensure continuity of services and programs for everyone. Next slide, please. Here's a little bit more detail and talking about the corporate priorities. We set corporate priorities to ensure that we prioritize the health of the organization, offer responsive and efficient services to the public, and can demonstrate value for precious taxpayer dollars, especially in an era where the city has had to implement historically higher property tax increases to pay for the critical services that we deliver. And we set strategic priorities in order to keep our city livable and remain focused on our core public services. At a high level, our 4 key strategic priorities are maintaining and creating affordable housing, keeping Toronto moving, investing in people and neighborhoods, and tackling climate change and building resilience. The corporate and strategic priorities are the key anchor points that guide the work that we do every day. Next slide. Now I'm going to spend a few minutes describing my service area, corporate services, and our key priorities. This is our vision statement as established through the 2024 budget process last year. And fundamentally, corporate services is a service provider. And the majority of our work through our technologies, our buildings and fleet, to name a few, enable the city to run. Much of the city's work hinges on the corporate services team ability to deliver on a daily basis, providing safe and clean buildings like this one, protecting critical technology and infrastructure and data, enabling our ability to communicate with each other and with the public, or keeping vehicles on the road to collect garbage or clear snow. Our service group also holds the levers to driving action on the climate. Next slide, please. This is our senior management team. I am privileged to work with a seasoned, diverse group of leaders who bring a wealth of experience and unique perspectives to the work. And it's important to me that we not only focus on individual divisions and their priorities, but that we also build a cohesive team that works together to understand our key issues and bring forward innovative solutions. Next slide. So finally, here's a snapshot of our priorities for the current year in corporate services. Some of these priorities and challenges are common across the Toronto Public Service, and others are unique to corporate services, and I'll highlight just a couple that are unique. Assets. So as the city's asset owner, we have a duty to responsibly manage our assets in the most effective way possible, and sometimes that means making difficult decisions about how we allocate our funding in a very difficult financial context. Climate. We have the privilege of carrying responsibility for the city's climate action plan with a key focus on transitioning our own assets to cleaner energy, but also implementing policies that drives changes in behavior in the public and in the broader community. These are just a couple of examples of the unique work that we lead in corporate services. Thank you for your attention, and I believe I am handing it over to the city clerk, John Elvidge. Okay, you'll introduce him. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Next is our infamous city clerk, John Elvidge. He'll speak for 20 minutes. Over to you, John.
Well, thanks very much, Joe. It takes me a lot not to call you counselor after so many years, but now he's just average Joe. No, just Joe. I want to start by wishing everyone here a happy International Day of Democracy. That's on Sunday, September 15th. It's a United Nations day, and the United Nations created it to encourage people, I guess, around the world, I was going to say in democratic nations, but maybe in other nations as well, to annually take stock of the health of democracy around them. So what better day or what better timing for you to be here and starting your journey in this course here in the council chamber. So I want to also welcome you to the council chamber. And as I always like to say, what happens in this room matters. If we could capture the words and thoughts that have come out of the mouths of people in this room and floated up to this impressive ceiling, we would be able to really accurately document the evolution of this city. And I think about some of the debates that have gone on in this chamber, and we think about how important it is, Joe. The very first smoking ban, like no smoking bylaw in public places in this country, was passed in this chamber. It's now the law of the land pretty much everywhere, I think. Maybe there's some place in Canada that it's not the case, but it's now universally accepted. This is the chamber where the very first pesticide ban on residential properties was passed and put into place, and that is now also something that's across the country. So I like to think of this room as a laboratory. This is a laboratory in democracy and a laboratory in urban development, and I welcome you here to it today. Jen Forks and I are going to set out today, maybe go to the next slide and we'll have a little overview. We want to give you the building blocks and the fundamentals on how the city is governed to help you navigate the next 10, 12 weeks, whatever it is. As you hear other speakers in this chamber, as you do coursework and as you prepare papers, we want to give you some of the building blocks so that you can refer back to those when you're doing your research and so forth. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of the clerk really briefly. Jen and I are going to go through how the place works, how the governance structure here works. And then lastly, because it's topical, or has been topical for the last couple of years, we'll talk a little bit about the strong mayor powers that the province granted to certain mayors in the province. So, starting with the role of the city clerk's office. So, I like to always say that the city clerk is the one of the original municipal jobs. It's the OG job. When the city of Toronto was incorporated in 1834, the idea of a clerk was already a very strong tradition in the incorporation governance structures that existed in Canada. And because this job of clerk has been around since 1834, it has accumulated many different responsibilities, and some of them are related, some of them are unrelated, but there's been a long list of things that the clerk is responsible for that they've acquired in those 190 years. Listen, all due respect to my friend David, I think the city clerk is the best job in the city because it gives me and it gives our team kind of a front row seat to the unfolding of democracy in this chamber, but also in other buildings and other places around the city. A couple of things about it. The clerk is appointed by council. It's a so-called statutory officer, which means council must have one and must appoint one. The clerk and the clerk's office reports to city council. You saw the org chart that David put up. The clerk reports to city council for the discharge of the city clerk's functions, and that's to city clerk as a body. So if, you know, it's a 26-headed beast that we report to. I personally have if you saw that chart, there's a dotted line between the clerk and the city manager. So I do have accountability of the city manager for things like budget and time and attendance and vacation and all those good things. But my core responsibility is to council. It is a neutral and nonpartisan job. So when we perform our jobs well in the city clerk's office, we are facilitating the governance process here in the city. We are not injecting our views into that. When we get to Q&A later, you know, sometimes I'm asked questions about what I think about what should happen here, and that's really not our role in the clerk's office. Our job is to facilitate all the other actors and all the other participants in the process. And then the last thing I'll just say is that some of the duties that the clerk carries out in Ontario are done independently. So clerks in Ontario, including here, we run the elections process, the municipal elections process, and we do that independently of the council. Council doesn't get to determine many of the features of an election because they are, in essence, a committee of candidates, if you will. They're people who are actually running in the election. So the clerk is given broad authority to conduct an election in an independent fashion. And then the other two areas are, again, when I talk about collecting weird things over 190 years, we issue marriage licenses, burial permits, and registered deaths here in the city, and that's on behalf of the province of Ontario. And for that, we're accountable to the Registrar General of Ontario. So there's, it's a strange compendium of things. So this diagram really kind of, I like to share this because it really explains who we are and how we behave and what comes out of our office. We see ourselves, or I see myself in the job, but the team that I work with, we see ourselves as loyal to our wonderful system of government. I'm going to disclose, I'm a very big fan of municipal government, the form of municipal government. I'll talk in a few minutes about how it's different than those other forms. But we see ourselves as loyal to a well-run governance structure that maximizes the opportunities for all of the participants in the process to take part in the democratic process. So that three principal groups are the members of council, the public service, and the public. And it's a very interesting, well, I should say what we do is that where those Venn diagrams overlap, that's us, that's our space. Our job is to maximize those opportunities. And the thing that makes it a very interesting job, and sometimes colorful job, is that our advocacy for the system sometimes puts us into a little bit of conflict with individual participant groups. So what do I mean by that? So when we advocate for the public, when we advocate for public notice, lots of disclosure of information, that, I'll just say discreetly, sometimes challenges the interests of either elected members or the public service. Public service maybe sometimes would like something to go faster, maybe not as much time for public input, but it's our job to speak up for the public when those rights start to be trampled upon. Similarly, we stick up for the members of council. Their job is to, they have duties, responsibilities that they have to carry out, and sometimes when we're sticking up for members of council, again, these other two groups say, hey, you're on their side, not our side. No, we're on everyone's side. We're trying to make this system of government work the way it was designed. So it's a very, the people that work in the clerk's office is a very interesting role we play. And I'll just give you a little short, on the next slide, a little summary of the different parts of the clerk's role in the clerk's office. I won't go through all those, but it's everything from elections to our corporate information management team is all about records, privacy, freedom of information requests, the Toronto Archives. Those are all part of our portfolio. Member services and program support, it's our job. We provide the support to the mayor and members of council. We help them hire staff. We pay their bills. We keep them out of trouble, we hope, most of the time. We provide all the support so that they can carry out their duties. Our secretariat is responsible for the meetings that take place here, for things like public appointments, member appointments, and some of the other services I mentioned. And then lastly, our strategic protocol and external relations group. The clerk's office is responsible for protocol, for international relations, ceremonies, and things like that. So it is a very wide portfolio. Okay, let's go on and start talking a little bit about the governance fundamentals here at the city. So next slide. So the basics, first of all, David talked about this. There's a 26-member council. We have 25 councillors who are elected in a ward by the electors in that ward, and we have the mayor who is elected citywide by all voters. Okay, so that's our council, 26 members. Our average ward population is over 100,000. Our largest ward is about 150,000. That's Etobicoke Lakeshore, Ward 3. If it was its own city, it would be the 12th largest city in Ontario. So our wards are big. The City of Toronto, the current form of the City of Toronto was created in 1998 through an amalgamation of municipal governments. And at the time we had 58 members. And if you took a moment down on the floor of the chamber here, you'd see there are 58 desks on the floor here. And that's why there are so many chairs. But we're very prudent here, fiscally prudent. So when we got smaller, we didn't take the furniture out, David. We just, we let it all stay here. We went down to 45 members of council, which we were for quite a long time. And then in 2018, famously, if you were paying attention in 2018, on about a few weeks before the municipal election. The provincial government reduced us from 44 wards to 25 wards, and so that's what we are now. We don't have a party system here. This is an important thing to discuss. It's a difference between ourselves and Westminster governments like that at Queen's Park and in Ottawa. And when I say we don't have a party system, I don't mean to say that there aren't party affiliations, because some of our members of council do identify with parties in a very loose or broad form. But there is no party system that operates here where members are parts of formal voting blocks, where if they break ranks with other people of the same stripe, you know, they're in trouble or there's some sort of penalties. That does not exist here. All members of council are, sometimes I like to say we have 26 parties of one here. They are unlimited in the way they vote. They're unlimited in the way they speak in this chamber. They are representing their constituencies. They are not representing a party and subject. Again, you know, when we talk about a party system, if a party system were to operate here, it would mean that people would all vote of that party on the same way on everything, and there'd be sanctions if you broke ranks and voted a different way. That's what happens where there are parties in, say, Vancouver or Montreal, where we do have municipal parties. That does not operate here. One of the reasons I love the system of government. We have a 4-year term. It is fixed. Unlike provincial and federal governments who say they have a fixed term, they don't really, because the Premier or the Prime Minister can decide legally to choose another date. But here our dates are fixed. Every 4 years on the 3rd Monday in October, and we just roll along to that schedule. Okay, that's a little bit about council. Next. Oh, and here, yes, and here is our ward boundary. So again, 1 member per ward. And you know, like one of the great features of our system and having independent members of council is here we have 25 people that come from all walks of life and all parts of the city. They're all represented here. Just as an aside, I'll say if we had 44, it would be even more representation, but that's, we're stuck with 25. So we have 25 people come from different occupations. Some are owners, some are renters, some use transit, some drive, some have been here a long time, some are recent arrivals in Canada. It is a diversity of people, and that is what contributes to the debates that go on in this chamber and make it so exciting to sit in this chamber and watch these debates. So there's a pictorial representation. Next slide. Couple of other basics, just while we're in the 101 category here. So the city is a creature of the province. What does that mean? It means in this country, we do not have what exists in other countries of the world, which is some form of home rule or charter city status or self-governance of urban areas like a city-state. Does not exist in Canada. In the Canadian Constitution, the responsibility for municipalities is assigned to the provinces, and the provinces make all the rules in every province in this country for how municipalities operate. The main vehicle through which we get our powers here at the city, not through the Constitution, that comes through something called the City of Toronto Act, a provincial statute, and it sets out these sort of broad powers for the cities, the powers of a natural person, which for those of you with a legal background know that that is a specific term, and broad powers of a government. The city has generally permissive legislation. It can do anything that it considers desirable or necessary for the inhabitants of the city, but you'll see at the bottom there that it cannot pass a law or bylaw that conflicts or frustrates, not just conflicts, but frustrates a law of the provincial or federal government. So that is our boundary. Like we can't make things illegal in the city that are otherwise made legal by the provincial government. So case in point right now, beer and wine and convenience stores, totally a provincial area of territory. If this council wanted to put some limits on that or do something differently, not possible because we can't frustrate the provincial regime. Okay, next slide. Now, just Again, if you're doing research, if you're looking at a policy area, attacking a policy area, you're going to want to understand what the legislative and the statutory framework for that is. Because as I mentioned, the City of Toronto Act is kind of like our kind of quasi, I don't want to call it a constitution because it's not a constitution at all, but if it's our founding document of authority that says what all the powers of the city are and all the limits and all the things that can happen. There are a bunch of other pieces of legislation which govern us on a daily basis. So the Municipal Elections Act is an Ontario-wide act that governs how elections happen. MFIPA, Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, governs how governs the rights of Ontarians to access information that governments hold about you. It is a requirement that requires David and me and everyone else who works here to make information available on request to anybody who asks for it. There are some exceptions to that, of course, but it is a foundational part of legislation. The other half of that is this legislation ensures that the people have a right to privacy and that the information that we do hold about you that's personal is kept private and safe and secure. So these are tombstone pieces of legislation which really guide the work we do. Municipal Conflict of Interest Act is an act that governs the conduct of members of council, ensures that their interests don't conflict with the interests of the city and the public. The Planning Act sets out the planning regime. The Heritage Act sets out the heritage regime. There's a whole bunch of other pieces of legislation that govern all the things that David talked about earlier, all the services that we provide. There's probably a piece of provincial legislation which governs how that work is to be continued. So again, if you're in a research project, you're trying to what's the city doing about housing? You need to follow the line through all of these kinds of documents. Okay, next. Couple of fundamental things about how power flows here at the city. The powers of the city are to be exercised by council and by bylaw. And this is an interesting statement because this is a city of 3 million people and there's a lot of activities and programs and services. So how possibly can council exercise all the powers and duties of the city? And so the reality, of course, is that there is a very elaborate system of delegation in place that ensures that, for example, the City of Toronto Act says that council hires people. Well, you know, we can't, every time we're going to hire someone, we can't bring council to this chamber to make that decision. So that power has been delegated to the city manager, and the city manager has then delegated that power to individual department heads. So that's the regime that's in place, and that's how it works practically. Okay, here's the number one thing I want you to take away that's really fundamental to understanding this place. Unlike those other governments, unlike Queen's Park, unlike Parliament Hill, there is no separation of executive and legislative powers in municipal government. So if you remember, if you've done Political Science 101 or grade 12 something or other, there's 3 branches of government. You know, the legislative branch that makes the laws, makes the decisions. The executive branch, which is responsible for carrying out the decisions of the legislative branch, and then, of course, the judicial branch. At Queen's Park, of course, we have the Legislative Assembly, which is the legislative branch, and then the Premier and the Cabinet form the executive branch of government. They get to have additional powers that carries out the wishes of the legislature. Here, in this room, it's one and the same. Council is the executive branch and the legislative branch. And another way for me to say that is, nobody has the powers of a premier. Nobody has the powers of cabinet here. All of the decisions and all of the powers, as the heading on this slide says, are to be exercised by the council as a whole, by the body of 26. And so that changes dynamics, right? We have a mayor, yes, sure, we have a mayor, but the mayor is not like the premier. The mayor does not have the powers that a premier has. The mayor has one vote in this council. The mayor must sit in that seat right there, you're in the mayor's seat, and she must persuade this council to follow her if she's to be successful. She doesn't have executive privileges to advance things. in the same way those other levels of government do. There is now going to put a little asterisk on that, and Jen's going to talk a little bit about the recent strong mayor powers that have been introduced. But I will take a position here today, and I'll take on anyone later at the end of 12 weeks who wants to come back and debate it with me. I don't think the powers that the province has put in place to give a strong mayor a mayor additional powers has really created what we would call an executive branch or executive powers for the mayor. We still have to get, for things to go forward in the city, on a 26-member council, majority rules, there have to be 14 people agree to it. 14 hands go up in this chamber to agree to something. And the mayor has to get those 14 votes if she wishes to act in an executive fashion. It makes it a beautiful system of government. Yeah. Joe's giving me the signal, but I'm already there. Okay. Last thing I just wanted to mention to you is that some city officials exercise statutory authority independently of council. I've mentioned the clerk's powers. The fire chief, for example, has certain powers the fire chief can do without coming here. There's a handful of other officials who do the same things. Okay. Quickly, we'll just go 2 slides, I think. Yeah, next slide. I've talked about this, the delegation of powers to various other bodies. Next slide, please. And then David talked about our agencies and corporations. So I just wanted to, wrap up my section with that by saying council has to exercise all the powers and duties, and it does delegate things to city officials for practical purposes. And as David mentioned so ably earlier, some of those powers are delegated to agencies, boards, and commissions to carry out functions. So that's the first half of our governance structure. I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Jennifer Forks. And, or Joe will.
Okay. Oh, over to Jennifer. But if there's one thing, just to give an example of how important the city clerk's role is to be independent. So I would move a motion that says, okay, let's put a bike lane on Davenport, and I write it out and it's not really right. So I go to the clerk and say, can you put this in clerk language? And so the clerk would put it in clerk language. But then someone else says, I don't want to bike lane on Davenport, and he goes over or she goes over to the clerk's office, to the clerk who sits in on that desk there, and says, I don't want a bike lane on Davenport. And then I would go and I'd say, oh, I see that person's going to the clerk, and I'd go to the clerk, can I see their motion so I can strategize around it? And he would say no, because he would help me with my motion and he would help the opposition with their motion. That is a testament to how independent his office is. And it drove some of us crazy some of the times that he wouldn't show his cards. Anyway, okay, over to Jennifer to talk more about the clerk and what they do. Jennifer, over to you.
Thanks, Joe. I also am going to struggle to call you Joe. And thanks, everyone, for being here. I'm excited. I'm going to pick up where John left off on how government works, and especially on how City Council actually goes about making the decisions. So I get the fun job of explaining the actual mechanics. So we're going to take all the building blocks we've talked about so far, and then pick up with how decisions actually come to be made. Next slide, please. So one of the other tenets of our system of governance here at the local level is that the public has a large role to play. So as John had illustrated earlier, one of the major participants in local democracy is actually the public. The public, yourselves, as you're doing right now, but if council was in session, it would look a little bit differently, is the public has the right to observe and participate in council's decision making. And the reasons for this are actually grounded in some of that framework legislation. So the statutory requirements require us, the City of Toronto Act requires us to conduct our city business in public. What this means is that all council meetings or our committee meetings or board meetings are open to the public. So you are welcome to come on down to City Hall or one of our other buildings where our meeting is being hosted and watch local democracy in action. We're obliged to tell the public when meetings are going to be held. They cannot be sprung on you without what we call adequate notice or good public notice. All of our council and committee and board documents, as John had mentioned about public information, are available freely. The materials that members of council deliberate based on, or the deliberations are based on, are actually public. You can find out with the same information that they have about what's going to be debated and what's going to be decided upon. We also have some rules about how City Council conducts its business. So that actually happens all in public. There are no, with some very limited exceptions, there's no voting in secret. When a vote is taken, the results of that vote are public information. So you are able to understand who voted which way if the votes are recorded. And that's a really important piece of this local democracy. So you can see your elected officials making their decisions. So first, the public's right to information and to observe. But there's also an element of the public participation in local democracy. Anyone can come and appear in front of a committee or a local board and speak, make their arguments about a matter that's on that agenda. We hear from about maybe close to 2,000 folks every year on a whole smattering of issues that are before committees and boards for debate. If you don't have time to come and speak, that's fine too. We'll take your comments in writing. City councilors are given all the communications that members of the public are trying to persuade them with in writing so that they have that additional information to inform their decision making. Next slide. So, how does it all work? As both David and John had alluded to, there are infinite number of types of issues and decisions that the city has to make. And there is no way that they can debate them and hear from the public all as this giant room of 26 people. So we actually have created a committee system to manage that volume of work and the workload so that members of council can dig into topics, hear from the public, and then make their recommendations to council for a final decision when that's necessary. So up here is our committee structure. So this is the way that City Council has divided up how it's going to ask different topics to be studied. We have what we call 4 standing policy committees. These are our Economic and Community Development Committee, which their primary focus is around social cohesion, the economy, neighborhoods, businesses. We have the General Government Committee, which is a bit more internal focusing. It's on administrative operations of the city, because as you can imagine, there are quite a few decisions about those. We have the Infrastructure and Environment Committee with a focus on hard infrastructure, the natural environment, making recommendations about our infrastructure needs, roads, sewers, parks, and also about the sustainability of the city's environment. And we also have a Planning and Housing Committee, which is, studies things like the urban form of the city and matters of change when it comes to property standards, urban growth, housing development, and housing services. So in addition to those big policy areas, we also have an executive committee, which sort of is an overarching, it doesn't govern those committees, but rather where there are intersections about priorities, plans, intergovernmental relations, the governance of the city itself, its relationships with those agencies and corporations that you've seen, and also the financial integrity of the city. So where we're debating things about how taxation may unfold, for example. And finally, we have, although it's just one box up here, 4 community councils, and this is a slightly different focus. So our community councils are, next slide please, are committees, but they're geographically focused in nature, so representing 4 different areas of the city. They're made up of the members of council who are in that geographic region, and they focus very much on local neighborhood issues. So things that may not affect the entire population of the city, because it's very concentrated. So these are things like local traffic regulations, speed management, and exemptions to things that really are neighborhood specific, like speed bumps, fence heights between neighbors, things like that. And it's that concentration to sort of local interest. That's an interesting feature of our government because it allows decisions in different parts of the city on very local matters to sometimes vary. So you may see a neighborhood in one part of the city with a lot of speed bumps and another one in a totally different part of the city that does not. And that's because the local councillors of that area are making decisions on behalf of their local neighborhoods. There are some decisions, as John has explained earlier, that City Council has also delegated down to those community councils to make. So they are the final decision maker on some of those very local matters. And sometimes they still need council approval, so they'll make some recommendations up to council as well. So in addition to the big structure, City Council has also established what we call our advisory bodies. These are different than committees. They're not made up of city councillors. Rather, they're made up of members of the public who have been appointed by city council to represent different aspects of civic life. It's a very interesting feature of our government because these advisory bodies provide council with advice on matters, but from a perspective that may not always be represented in this chamber by the elected officials themselves. They've gone out and said, we would like advice on very specific themes from different diverse groups of people with a focus. So all of our council advisory bodies, and we have quite a few of them listed here, are composed of at least 50% members of the public, which makes it a very different representation of voices that may be not heard otherwise. So this is the fun part. This is where we put all those foundation pieces into practice. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes explaining how decisions are actually made. The first bit is that, for the most part, new ideas, so new business, start at the committee level. Our committees consider reports from city officials, from proposals from members of council, and anything else that city council might have asked them to study. And the reason we start in the committee is because it's down at this committee level where there's a fewer number of city councillors, and there's an availability of opportunity for the public to give their presentations and their interests. We can do, or council can do, a lot more intense study of whatever the matter is before them. So it allows for the public to present, it allows for more detailed scrutiny about a specific topic, and it breaks down, again, that massive range of topics that council has to make decisions about into smaller thematic chunks. It also allows city councillors to dig into topics that they're really passionate about and be able to ask and learn and make good recommendations without having to turn their minds so deeply to absolutely everything else. Because they are, as John said, they're representing 100,000 people or more, and it's a lot of work. So dividing up the work and starting in committee where they can go through it in manageable chunks makes a lot of sense. So here's my example. Does anybody recognize what this is? What is it? All right, for anyone who didn't hear, it's a bicycle thing that a lot of people can pedal. It's called a quadricycle, or more often a pedal pub. So this is a large quadricycle, and we're going to talk about how the city council came to allow these on our streets. Next slide. Ooh, does that photo go? Perfect. Okay. So the schematic here is basically how an idea becomes a bylaw or a law of the city. In 2022, this is our legislative framework, the province of Ontario introduced some amendments to the Highway Traffic Act, so a provincial piece of legislation, that would allow municipalities, if they want to allow quadricycles to operate in the city. So we had a piece of provincial legislation that said if you want to, municipalities in Ontario, you can develop some rules around these things and let them on your streets. So our city staff went out, did some consultations, looked at the legislation, gave some thoughts to pros and cons, and developed a city staff report and brought it to a standing committee for city councillors to make some decisions on and recommendations on what council should do about opting into allowing these quadricycles on our streets. So in 2022, they brought a report to a standing committee. At that standing committee, about a dozen people wrote letters and a handful of people showed up to speak and give their opinions, some from the tourism industry and some in opposition for whatever traffic or other reasons they may have. So that standing committee heard all that input. They asked some questions, more questions from the city staff, and then made a recommendation to city council that city council should enact a bylaw to allow, on a very small basis, 8 licenses for pedal cabs of the quadricycles, with a maximum of 4 licenses for 2 different operators, 4 licenses per operator, so no more than probably 2 or 3 operators, and a few other rules about that, about what kinds of streets they would be allowed on, the fact that there's no alcohol allowed on them, and a few other limitations. So city council then passed a bylaw that allowed these things on our streets, charged a licensing fee for it, and introduced some regulations about who could operate them. In 2023, these were all over not all over, but they were on some limited streets. And the city did what we do, which is we studied it. We looked for traffic impacts. They looked for public feedback about people's thoughts on the impact of these on traffic or on the economy. And in 2024, so just recently, a few months ago, brought back yet another city staff report back to committee. We had a few more pieces of input from the public. The committee made some more recommendations to City Council, and now we have an unlimited number of licenses for quadricycles, pedal pubs, and a few additional regulations about how and where they can operate, including where they can be parked and not parked, and those provisions are going to be in effect until 2032. So if you were around this summer and you may have seen a few things traveling around the streets, that's the process. We had a provincial piece of legislation that said the city could do something if it wanted to. City staff said, we'll look into it, we'll write a staff report, we'll bring it to the committee, the committee will hear from the public, make recommendations to council, council will make a decision, enact some laws, we'll monitor it, bring it back, and lather, rinse, repeat. And that is basically how council makes a lot of its decisions. And that brings me to council makes the final decisions, but there are a few parts of how city council operates that have now been impacted by what are sometimes referred to as strong mayor powers. But I'll explain what they are, and you might get a sense that maybe they're not as strong, but rather enhancements of the role of the mayor in the way that the city is governed. So the mayor has a few special powers and duties now enshrined in the City of Toronto Act. Some of those powers are related to advancing provincial priorities. So the mayor is allowed to bring matters directly to council if they choose. They can designate a matter and require, John had said, needs to gain 14 votes. They can actually designate a matter if they consider that it advances a provincial priority to require only 1/3, so not a majority, but only a 1/3 majority vote. And they can also veto a decision of council if, in the opinion of the mayor, it interferes with an advancement of a provincial priority. So that's on how the mayor can help advance provincial priorities. The next area of powers and duties is around the administrative and political governance of the city. So in the Act, the mayor can appoint the city manager, hire and fire some senior city officials, determine, as I explained the committee structure, it's actually the mayor right now who can determine what the committee structure of city council looks like. So they can create those committees, determine their mandates, and set out the membership, so how many members of council need to sit on them. The mayor also has the power to determine the administrative structure of the city, so what the org structure that David had shared earlier might look like, and in terms of those committees, can appoint the chairs and vice chairs of those committees. And the last bucket of special or strong mayor powers is around the preparation of the annual budget. So it is now the duty of the mayor to prepare the city's budget and present it to council. And should council pass some amendments to the mayor's budget, the mayor also has the power to veto those amendments. And then in turn, council may try to overturn the mayor's veto. There's a few features of these powers, next slide as I wrap up, that need to be noted. One is that the mayor has to exercise them in a transparent fashion. In other words, the mayor is required to exercise those powers in writing and subject to some of our information legislation, make those public. The mayor, should they choose, can delegate some of the powers over to others, either to city staff or to city council, although not the veto powers or the municipal budget powers. There are a few other features of the powers, which are just on the slide there. But I want to close out with a little bit of a reflection on how these powers are currently being exercised here in the City of Toronto. So at present, no mayor of Toronto has actually vetoed any decisions of council or brought a matter forward to council on their own or to require a 1/3 vote. The appointments of the city manager, our senior officials, has all been actually delegated off. So they have delegated to city council, the senior officials, and the city manager, and to the city manager, other senior officials. The mayor currently has retained the powers to establish those committees, and Mayor Chow has established and changed the composition of a few of our committees recently. The mayor has retained the power to appoint those committee chairs. And the mayor has continued now 2 successive budgets in a row to exercise the duty to prepare the city's annual budget. And it has been deemed passed with amendments. And then again, looping back to the top, at no point has the mayor vetoed any of the amendments adopted by council. So that's going to take me to the end of my presentation. I hope that gives you a little bit of sense about how things work. What I'd like to encourage you to do, as John had said before, is if you're doing research or you're interested in what's happening here at City Hall, please come check out how we, City Council's decisions. As I said at the very beginning, all of this is public information. You as residents of the city and anyone are entitled to know what's going on. So toronto.ca, this is my little plug. Toronto.ca/council is where we host all of the agenda materials and minutes of the decisions of council, as well as some open data sets around voting records. You can watch our indexed videos, so we live stream city council and committee meetings and then archive those videos online. And you can also go through and look at some of the mayor's decisions over the past few years. Toronto.ca/bylaws is the giant repository of the municipal code and the bylaws of the city. And if I can, I'll make a little plug for social media. You can follow us on X, on Instagram at Toronto Council, and you can watch any again of those meetings on YouTube at Toronto City Council Live.
Thank you, Jennifer. We are running a little late, but we still have time for some good questions. Thank you, David. Thank you, John. Thank you, Jennifer. If you are in the WebEx world, bottom right side, feel free to submit questions that you might have of the 3 good folks that are before us. And if you are here at City Hall, feel free to ask a question. Now's the time to do it. I'll prime the pump with the first question, but feel free to be thinking about, now's the time to think about the question that you've always wanted to ask a city clerk or a very senior official at City Hall. Now's your moment to do that. So I'll start to give you a model, and then you can then follow up. So here's my question. Many of us and certainly in the media have for the last little while noted the erosion of democracy with all orders of government, and certainly what is happening in the United States is a south of the border testament to that. Do you see this happening at the city level? That is, this erosion of democracy. Do you have any ideas as to how to address that erosion of community or the democratic deficit as a senior manager or as part of the city clerk's department? So it's a question to each of the 3 of you.
Okay, Fern, we're good? Well, that's a great question. I share what you're saying, Joe, about sort of concerns about what's happening in democracy in Western democracies. I think we're on alert for things arriving on our shores that are coming from foreign shores or south of the border shores. But good news, here's the good news. I would say post-COVID, where we saw a little bit of a dip in participation at City Hall, things have bounced back. So Jen mentioned the number of people who come out and present and engage with council as public presenters at committee meetings. Those numbers are back up to where they were. Number of people interested in being appointed to our boards and commissions. It's one of the things we do in the clerk's office. That number up is continuing to be up. People are wanting to contribute. They're wanting to join the committees here. Mayor Chow, I'm a neutral, so I'm not in favor of any councillor, but I will say one thing Mayor Chow has done is she's encouraged, more committees, more advisory committees, those types of things. And so we're seeing more people, come through the doors to participate and engage in City Hall. Another measure of engagement, I think, of the city is the open houses for planning matters and public matters and those types of things. And as far as I know, we're not seeing a fall off in that, despite the fact, that people, that there does seem to be lower engagement in voting in all jurisdictions, not just municipally, but federally and provincially and in other parts of the world. But that formal voting thing might be a little bit in danger, but participation here at City Hall, people coming through the door, is still very high. And that might be because, as you said, What happens at City Hall really, or David said, is everyday life.
And maybe then to pick up on how to combat that. One of the things we value so much here at the local level of democracy is that things are transparent. So unlike other orders of government where there may be mistrust in how governments are making decisions, one of our core tenets is the transparency of the local democracy. In other words, the public is able to watch decisions being made, have access to the same information that the decision makers have, and really understand, and if they choose to engage with accurate information that feeds the decisions. And I think that instills, I hope that instills in yourselves and others, a trust in local government. You may not agree, leading to some of the discourse with the decisions that are made, but I hope that the transparency of that process is one way of combating a lot of that distrust.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add is that our job as city staff is to collect data, and we do that through public consultations, but we also do that through the collection of quantitative data. And that allows us to be objective and open and transparent in terms of the decision-making process. So, as a public servant, that's what I depend on, is objective data, which allows us to put that forward to City Council for decisions.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's open it up. Some burning questions that you have here. Right there. Yeah, stand up, stand proud, stand tall, stand proud, press the button. Let's hear what your question is. Okay. And identify yourself and what college, university you're from.
All right, so my name's Fuad. I'm from the University of Toronto. I just have a question regarding ongoing projects in the city. So as we already know, Toronto's growing rapidly. It's actually one of the most rapidly growing cities in the world in terms of the crane index, which basically just records how many cranes are currently being used in the city. And my question is, since our city is growing so rapidly, we have to keep up with the necessary infrastructure, right? And who determines the priority of what infrastructure gets addressed first? Because right now we have several transit projects that are currently, some of them on hold, some of them really far behind, and some of them not even being looked at, such as Scarborough Line 2 extension. And but the Gardiner right now is down to 2 lanes and is being worked on every week. So, so we're clearly here. We have some priorities going on. But my question is, who is the one who determines which gets addressed first and which gets more funding? Because not only is this Gardiner being reconstructed as we speak, we currently have line 1 and 2, which have slow zones. So there are areas where the trains are literally not allowed to go past a certain speed because they might break the tracks. So there are clearly some priorities that I think aren't really being addressed. I just wanted to ask, who's the one who makes these decisions?
David's going to jump on that.
Yes, I'll jump on that because that's daily life here at the city. And you're going to have the CFO at the next session who's going to talk about the city finances and how that all works. My answer is it's complicated, but ultimately council makes that decision in terms of what we prioritize. And the reason I say it's more complicated than that, as the work that we advance, especially on infrastructure, as you describe it, transit, et cetera, goes beyond the municipal government and often includes the other orders of government. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to dollars and cents. What the city advances is based on the resources that come to bear, either through taxes, through the city's budget, and through the taxpayers that live in the city, but also the supports that we get from the other orders of government to advance work. And you talk about infrastructure projects specifically. There's other services that the city provides that depends on the support of the other orders of government: children's services, health services, housing. These are the big priorities of the city. Right, so I hope that kind of gets to your question.
Great, thank you very much. So someone wants a library, someone wants to finish the tracks, someone wants this, and then the budget person who you're going to see in 2 weeks says, oh, you only have this much money to play with. And then that's when the elbows come up and you're fighting for your priorities, and then David comes along and says, well, this doesn't meet the strategic priorities of council that was defined in the strategic plan. Anything to add to that, David?
Yeah, I mean, the city staff are making brutal priorities. I mean, in terms of corporate, I can talk about my service group a little bit, right? So we own the corporate buildings. We are responsible for the corporate buildings, right? That's about a portfolio of 465 buildings, including City Hall, the civic centers, emergency, police stations, fire stations, et cetera, right? We have a backlog in state of good repair of $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion. So to talk about the TTC also has a major backlog in the state of good repair, which is impacting their ability to keep the tracks maintained. And therefore, we're seeing slow zones on lines 1 and 2 as your example. So at the end of the day, I'll just repeat, at the end of the day, it all comes down to dollars and cents and prioritization. That's the reality we're living in right now.
Thank you, David. There was another question right there, and there's one up there. Any more questions here? 3, 4. Okay, 4. So you know what I'm going to ask, because we are almost out of time, folks. So let's do this really quickly. It's more important the questions that you ask than the answers they give. So what was your question, sir?
My question was about transparency, because you talked about how certain services are delivered by private corporations, but TTC and Toronto Hydro and stuff. Is the transparency model the same for those sorts of things as it is for the general city government?
Okay, thank you. Good question. Up there. Stand up, be proud. Okay, great. There was a person right there and a person up there.
Hello, my name is Chloe. I'm from TMU. I just had a question about the internal workings-ons of city staff. So council is a political place and councilors are political and city staff are human. So I'm just wondering how city staff navigate conflicts and problems that arise when working with the councilors. My councilor is Josh Matlow, and he's gotten into some conflicts with city staff before, so I'm just wondering how you navigate these type of conflicts, because of course, I think bureaucracy sometimes has a bit of a bad reputation amongst the general public, so I was wondering how we navigate the internal going on
Great
of
question.
this place.
And up there, last question.
Hi, my name's Hattie. I'm here from Centennial College. My question was that, given that we have a large backlog of the state of repairs and things, and raising, taxes has been a controversial issue, and I know that the city is by law not allowed to run a deficit. How does the city try and, wrestle its elbows to, prioritize what gets done first, even though it does come down to dollars and cents? And how does the city, aside from raising taxes, generate revenue, or is it possible for the city to get a loan to finance things?
Great. Good questions. Rapid fire, because we're already behind. We're supposed to end at 11 o'clock, so you have a minute each to answer those 4 questions and pick the one that you want. And I'll invite all of you who asked those questions to just hang around a little bit afterwards and go right up to these folks and ask the questions.
We'll tackle the transparency question, which is actually that the City of Toronto Act and its transparency provisions apply to our local boards. So anything that City Council establishes as a local board falls under the same rules. So you can also attend a meeting of the TTC. Their documentation for their meetings is all available online, as is the zoo or exhibition place or a number of our other public local boards. There are, however, slightly separate rules when City Council establishes a corporation. They fall under a different piece of legislation, and so the same degree of transparency may not apply in all those instances. But for our local boards, which is the majority of the service areas that have been delegated off to independent entities, they fall under local board definitions, and the City of Toronto Act applies.
The questions on finance, I'm going to defer to the next session to the CFO because I think he's in a better position to answer those detailed questions. As it relates to our engagement politically, I mean, we serve council. Ultimately, we serve council, and our fundamental role is to provide our best advice to council. That doesn't mean we can ignore the local ward city councilors. I mean, they provide us input. There's a lot of dialogue, but at the end of the day, our best advice is based on many different inputs, but our best advice is for the good of the city, and we put that forward to city council. So it's a part of the job to engage politically. What I can say in my experience in engaging politically is there's a very high level of mutual respect, and you know, there's a lot of listening on both sides. But local ward councillors can't make decisions or influence city officials in any particular way. We are responsible to provide our best advice to council for them to make a decision.
Thank you very much. We're going to have to end the questions there, but again, feel free afterwards. We'll have a little bit of time before we go upstairs to socialize with these fine folk, and you can ask those and any other questions that you would have. Next is we're going to give a thank you from two wonderful students. Darcy, you're after that. Two students from York University who are going to give a thank you on behalf of the entire group assembled here. Two great students from York University whose names are, if I was organized, I'd be dangerous. Just a second. There we go. Adrian Carter and Justin Stoddart on behalf of York and on behalf of this group, please give a thank you.
Hello, everyone. Okay. Hi, I'm Adrian Carter from York University. I just wanted to say thank you to our city service members for taking the time out of their busy and extremely important schedules to educate us students on something that'll help us make such important decisions for the rest of our lives and help inform us on, you know, where we see ourselves working here. So thank you so much, and I'll move it over to my colleague.
Yeah, going off of what he said, David, thank you. John, thank you. Jennifer, thank you for really describing the cohesiveness of different departments in the city on how it operates. So we thank you for that, and we'll hear what we learned back to the classroom and really expand on that. So thank you.
One more thing, there is a research project that is being undertaken by the professors of the course, and to describe it and how you can help with that project, we have Tharshi from the University of Toronto to explain that whole process. Over to you.
That was a bit high. Thanks, Joe. And wow, those presentations were really informative this morning, and you guys asked a lot of great questions. I wish I definitely had an opportunity like that when I was an undergrad. But anyways, hi everyone, my name is Tharshi. I am a PhD student in my second year in planning and geography at the University of Toronto. I'm here today because I am the graduate researcher for Civic Lab TO, and we're excited to launch this really awesome project that we've been working on. So in this role, I've been working very closely with your professors to create a survey to improve the course for future cohorts and ensure that other students also have this awesome opportunity. So not only will your responses help better the course, but we also aim to write a journal article and a report about the extent to which classes like this affect civic engagement. So in order to do this, we really need your help. I'll be administering 2 surveys for this project. One will be released next week via email by your course instructor, either email or an announcement. And a second follow-up survey will be released at the end of the course in November. I know that surveys can be kind of boring, but we think this would kind of be a really great opportunity for you guys to reflect on what you're about to learn in this course. So to be very, very clear, this survey is voluntary. It has no impact on your grades, and your professors will have no access to your responses until the end of the course. I'll be the one administering the survey, which means I'll be managing the data and obviously launching it, the first one and the second one. And your responses will be confidential while I receive both sets of survey results. In the survey, I do ask for your school affiliated email address, and this is really important because it will be used to link your responses from survey 1 to survey 2. And I'll also be using those email addresses to send you the link for the second survey. So please look out for an announcement from your professors. You have until about 5 p.m. on September 30th to complete it, and we would really, really, really appreciate your participation. Future students will really benefit from this and benefit from your involvement. So feel free to ask me any questions. I'll stick around. Your professors will also have my email address, so they'll post it on your course program thing. And then you can just email me if you have any questions about the survey. But thanks so much.
Thank you, Tharshi. Two more things. Well, first, again, thanks everyone for coming today. Our next session here is in 2 weeks, September 27th, and the focus of that session will be on city finances, so the money question, and on intergovernmental affairs, how we navigate our relationships with the province and the federal government, and maybe other institutions as well. A reminder, it's probably in your course syllabi, but also in terms of your scheduling, you may want to consider September 27th in 2 weeks after class. Dr. Sarah Diamond, one of the professors of the class, and Marcin Kedzior from Humber Polytechnique. They're going to lead a architectural site and public art tour for faculty, students, and staff participants. The tour will begin inside City Hall, move to Nathan Phillips Square outside, and then explore public art in the immediate vicinity. The discussion will include the history of architecture as well as the aesthetics, context, commissioning, and funding strategy for public art and great cities. Are they connected? If so, how are they connected? The tour will last about 60 to 90 minutes. That's in 2 weeks. Okay, so I'll just, last point before we say goodbye to each other. You're always welcome to come down here after class and talk to the people who do presentations. For today, for students from the universities, University of Toronto, OCAD, and York, and TMU as well, right? Yeah, TMU as well. There's a reception for all students and faculty up there, and if you're a college student, you just want to hang out, that's great too. There's coffee that is being served there. This will be your opportunity to meet other students and to find a student partner to undertake one of your reflection papers. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great weekend and a great rest of your day.